Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Stantec Water webinar series. We're pleased to present Jason Graham, who is speaking on embracing One Water and the water management steps for a resilient future. I'm Tony Fink, your hostess. During this meeting, you will be in listen-only mode. We invite you to submit questions at any time during the presentation. If you're joining via computer or your mobile device, you can do so by selecting the Q&A icon at the top of your screen. We'll also be dropping in links for you in that same window. Your questions will be addressed following the presentation. And with that, Jason, I'll pass it over to you to get us started.
Okay, I'm going to go off camera. Thank you, Tony, but thank you all for joining me today, and I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, thank you, Tony, and everyone else for joining me today. I plan on discussing how you can integrate available frameworks and approaches to maximize water system resiliency. These approaches could be referred to as One Water approaches. My name is Jason Graham, and I am part of Stantec's Management and Technology Consulting Group, and I also serve as Stantec's North American One Water lead. The picture on the right is of the city of Fort Collins, where I worked for 26 years, including serving as their first One Water executive director. My presentation today will focus on my belief that as a water industry, we must evolve from a traditional siloed utility management structure to one that is dependent on collaboration, inclusivity, and partnerships. Before we get started, let's take time for a quick safety moment. Water safety is important for all of us as the summer season approaches. Please keep these reminders in mind. Always swim in designated swim areas. Know the weather conditions for your swimming area. Have a swim buddy. Never swim alone, especially in open water. And wear a life vest, especially for young children. Have a plan for emergencies. Please let people know where you are, how long you'll be there, and when you'll plan to check in. And remember to always prioritize safety. I'm a quote person, and this quote by Mark Twain always comes to mind when I think about the historical importance of water, especially in the West. Whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. Going forward, water scarcity and the need for resilient community water systems will shape the water fighting of the future. And I am convinced that the resilient water systems of the future will have foundations built on integration of services, regional partnerships, and with a holistic mindset that recognizes multiple opportunities across the entire water cycle. So this sounds very One Water-ish, right? Well, yes, and there are multiple approaches that can be utilized to achieve similar outcomes. Stantec Consulting has experience working across multiple frameworks to develop unique and customizable solutions for each of our partners. To fully understand why I'm convinced of the value of these approaches for the future, I want to share some of my challenges leading a traditional One Water utility and its transition to becoming a One Water utility. My utility was set up much like you see here, with siloed services and purposes. The water utility was set up for safe drinking water and fire protection. Wastewater was for pollution prevention and environmental health. And stormwater for urban water management, flood protection, and environmental health. As a result of our siloed services, our operations and systems were largely siloed as well. These systems included our financial, regulatory, operational, and workforce programs, as well as our overall organizational management and culture. These structures generally served the community well because these services aligned with ratepayer expectations. But what these structures do not necessarily provide is an incentive or opportunity to work horizontally within these or amongst these silos. For example, it's easy to walk a ratepayer through the need and purpose for dedicated enterprise water funds because it directly addresses the necessary infrastructure, staff, equipment, and other resources needed to ensure that their drinking water for their family is safe and readily available. The same siloed conversations have taken place on the wastewater side and the stormwater side as well. These silos can be seen within an organization amongst neighboring water, wastewater, and stormwater providers, amongst state and federal regulatory agencies, as well as how community members, including residents and businesses, interact and engage with their water utilities. As an example, having a close alignment between the construction site, stormwater management, and the wastewater utility can help all entities meet customer expectations and comply with their permit requirements, such as dewatering permits, NPDES permits, and MS4 requirements. Another aspect of these siloed systems can be the development review processes and the various requirements. Historically, service areas have been built and funded to provide service to defined boundaries. These boundaries provide a definition to urban areas to generate a reliable revenue to fund and maintain these services. This left many unincorporated rural areas on the outside without publicly owned service provider. This resulted in people finding alternative solutions, such as wells, septic systems, and ultimately unique private water districts to serve small developments not served by neighboring urban areas. These borders still exist today, but these boundaries do not always align with the identity of the community or the region, resulting in perhaps lower quality of services, delayed emergency response, reduced revenue generation, and decreased customer satisfaction in areas outside the traditional boundaries. The challenges of the past persist today and will continue to be significant obstacles in the future. However, in addition to these established challenges, there are many more challenges facing water providers, and it is these challenges that will require new approaches and leadership going forward. The U.S. Water Alliance has stated many of the traditional approaches and assumptions used over the past 2 centuries to design, build, and operate our existing water systems are insufficient to meet present needs. In my experience, additional pressures such as population growth, affordability, climate resiliency, and changing weather patterns, along with technological advancements and overall escalating costs associated with the amount of aging infrastructure, have strained the traditional siloed model of providing water services. Other factors gaining traction include the increased influence of environmental groups, expectations on accessibility and transparency, diverse and broader stakeholder engagement, community activism, and a broader desire for public awareness and knowledge in services that were once taken for granted and largely invisible. But there are numerous other areas of importance and challenges all water services providers are facing. The number and complexity of these issues requires alternative approaches to delivering the critical water services that communities are dependent on. The need to rethink our approaches to water management, which remains largely driven by regulatory agencies and evolving expectations of both residents and the business community, is now. As we consider solutions, it's crucial that we take a community-focused, borderless, and inclusive approach that recognizes all aspects of the water cycle. Ultimately, the goal is to manage all water as a single, interconnected entity. Let's explore this vision by looking at a few key strategies. The first will be regional collaboration, followed by recognizing the full water cycle, and finally applying a integrated systems approach. One important strategy is to seek opportunities for partnership and collaboration at a regional scale. Today's population is more transient, frequently commuting across city and service boundaries for work, recreation, school, and entertainment, with the same expectations for high quality, available, and affordable water services wherever they find themselves. Economic and residential development is often concentrated in areas that align with these behavioral patterns, and many affordable housing options are in neighboring communities. To meet these needs effectively, water services providers should be planned from a regional perspective to ensure equitable access to quality services for all. Water plays a critical role in a community. By understanding a community's full water cycle, you can understand the role it has in economic development, job creation, sustainability, and of course, public health and safety, and many others. Taking an integrated systems approach to managing a region's complete water cycle enables water professionals to optimize solutions across all sectors. This approach considers the collective finances, workforce dynamics, infrastructure picture, the stakeholder engagement, community and regional economics, as well and accessibility amongst other factors that are crucial to delivering adequate water services today. Integration should begin with internal city departments or internal to your organization, looking for opportunities to align across water utilities, as well as areas such as community development, public works, parks and rec, sustainability, and emergency services. While there may be current successful examples of this integration happening, the challenge lies in elevating, supporting, and replicating these efforts across the community at a much larger scale. For example, currently we may see different engineers dedicated to a specific water discipline with perhaps little overlap of projects and overall system-wide knowledge of where they're at. With an integrated workforce system approach, imagine if we had 3 water engineers capable of working across the horizontal or across the organizational boundaries horizontally to deliver holistic solutions for the community. As a former water utility director and now as a consultant, I realize that the same solution does not fit all. I advocate for clearly defining the drivers and expected levels of service for communities and developing a customized plan to start wherever you are in your current baseline. Some call this vision One Water. I support the use of One Water terminology and its principles, as I believe they serve as a needed catalyst for this critical time in the water industry. And there are many frameworks, models, and guidance documents that can start you down the One Water path. Each of these has value and can provide the direction, guardrails, and in some cases, key performance indicators for success. Each of these approaches was developed in part to address the same overall issues, including rising costs, aging infrastructure, regulatory pressures, population changes, changing workforce dynamics, and increased community accessibility. As a result, there is constant language in each framework that focuses on strong leadership commitment, inclusivity, recognition of the holistic water cycle, leveraging multiple stakeholders and finding multiple wins, affordability and accessibility, collaboration, climate resiliency, and having a system for continuous improvement and decision-making processes. Here are the frameworks and guidance references to help you, and these are the ones that I refer to when I'm having these conversations as well. The first one is the U.S. Water Alliance vision for a One Water future, which provides overall hallmarks of what a One Water approach is to help guide you forward. EPA's Effective Utility Management Framework, which primarily focuses on managing all aspects of a water system's operations and maintenance activities. AWWA's Water 2050 vision, which provides a long-term industry vision for all of us as leaders to use as guiding principles as we go forward. Water Research Foundation's One Water Cities document and metrics provides a strategy, a roadmap, and KPIs to help implement and get started on a One Water program. And finally, EPA's integrated planning framework and toolkits focuses primarily on stormwater and wastewater planning to achieve greater water quality improvements through integrated solutions amongst those two utilities in particular. Embracing a more collaborative and regional approach to water management will allow providers to effectively prepare for these challenges. It will also create opportunities to address larger scale issues such as weather disruptions and public health responses. We already have the technology to link models, effectively utilize data, and monitor in real time for improved decision-making for the regions. Ultimately, water decisions and investments will be made in support of community values and goals with transparency and inclusivity. So what's next? We've reached a tipping point in many of these conversations and initiatives. Increasingly, communities are recognizing that the demands are greater than ever, with resources remain scarce and challenging to obtain. Now is the time to foster these partnerships, embrace these new approaches, and lead the way forward as water professionals. Challenges still remain. In particular, education is needed, and there's a general lack of awareness of the complete water cycle and the shared resources available. Many of our water leaders don't have adequate succession planning and key cross-discipline relationships that form the foundation of the partnerships and the collaboration that will be needed going forward. And our industry is also risk-adverse and slow to change. Many remain attached to a mindset of this is how we've always done it. And believe me, when there's so much at stake for us as water utility leaders, it is hard to change what we have done, especially when our historical performance has met acceptable expectations. As leaders in the water industry, I challenge you to consider 5 items when adopting an alternative approach to your future water management strategies. Recognize and celebrate that you are likely already have examples of successfully implementing a One Water approach. It's not complicated, and it starts with asking simple questions, such as what examples do we have that demonstrate excellent collaboration? What examples do we have where we have leveraged regional partnerships? What were the common themes, and what was the benefit to the customer's experience? Secondly, consider all affected individuals, industries, and community elements involved in whatever challenge you are addressing in the water industry. Do you have all the voices in the room? Are all the voices empowered to speak up? Are there accessibility issues with communication and technology? Are we effectively speaking to the audience to promote understanding? Thirdly, acknowledge the expertise and valuable ideas already present within your organization and empower passionate individuals by giving them a seat at the table, enabling them to contribute to unbiased and effective solutions. Additionally, make use of available resources and thought partners and energy throughout your community. Start by asking, what are the sources of our thought partners and innovative hubs that may exist in our area? How can we engage and leverage them differently or more effectively going forward? Fourthly, encourage your groups, teams, and staff to push the conversations just a little bit further. Create a culture of psychological safety for all to allow challenging and proactive discussions. Ask questions such as, what are the next industry challenges? Where do we have our gaps? What are the upcoming, or who are the upcoming champions in our field and in our organization? Lastly, envision the world in 2050. Consider the story that remains to be written between now and then. How do you plan to show up to move the needle forward? What will be your legacy? What will be your team's legacy? If there's one thing you should take away from this, it's that the One Water mindset can be approached by many angles, with an overall emphasis on the importance of managing all water sources in an integrated, inclusive, and holistic manner. Again, I am convinced that the foundational attributes we discussed today will be required to secure a sustainable water future for all people and our planet. I leave you with one challenge: to recognize the opportunities for integration, inclusivity, and partnerships that promote this concept that all water has value and should be managed as a single valuable resource. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to you, Tony.
All right, well, thanks, Jason. Great topic. We do already have a couple of questions here already, and I encourage you, our listeners, to keep those questions coming by typing them in the Q&A drop down at the top panel on your screen. So, first question in, I think you may have briefly touched on this, but how does OneWater apply to my utility, or how can it benefit me? They're giving in the instances of they're not physically able to connect their water, wastewater, and stormwater systems.
Yeah, great question. I think the way I would answer that or approach that is no matter where you're at, if it's a water utility, a wastewater district, or a stormwater district, there are opportunities to build interconnects and integrate amongst your peers, amongst your establishments, and also reach outside your organization to really figure out if there's a ways that you can collaborate, not just with your immediate work with your immediate peers, but how can you work and leverage those resources that may be outside. Also, there's opportunities for workforce development. There's opportunities to really find those sweet spots in your ratepayer financial things, so you can come back and you can tell the customer, hey, dig once is a common OneWater kind of example. We were able to be more efficient with ratepayer money, with time, because we were strategic in our planning of when we were going to replace a water distribution line, collection, and stormwater lines, and in some communities the fiber that serves the internet as well. So it's really thinking about that, no matter where you're at, thinking about those things about how do I integrate, how do I collaborate, and how do I work without outside the boundaries and the borders that may exist within my community and organization.
All right, well, have you noticed, here's one in, have you noticed more or less interest in this approach over the past few years? You mentioned you had come from the client side and now on the consulting side. So are you seeing differences on being on each side?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question. I think in my experience, OneWater, it's picked up in interest, but there's also, again, going back to those approaches that I presented, there's also an uptick in all of those types of approaches. So clients, utilities, myself, there's always a desire to figure out a framework or an approach or some way to help move the needle forward. In my previous role, I was really big into ISO 14001 and really adhered to that framework and that PDCA kind of process to move it forward. And I see these approaches as just another iteration of those types of mentalities of really providing a framework to help guide professionals in this environment. And the thing that is coming up more that maybe those traditional frameworks didn't have is this inclusivity and stakeholder engagement and the value of water, recognizing the value of water throughout a community, not necessarily what the water utility provides, but what is the true value of that water throughout the whole community. And so there is more awareness of those attributes as water challenges, scarcity, drought, aging infrastructure. All the aging infrastructure amongst all of those utilities are really driving up a lot of the cost, and they're really putting pitch points on local utilities to be able to pay for those, and passing that on to ratepayers is hard to do. So you have to find out alternative funding, which is another challenge in itself. So.
All right, kind of following along that, what are the most common or the most important implements in a successful OneWater campaign that you have seen?
What I've seen is you really have to start internally. You really have to start building the awareness, building the connection amongst your staff of how they can help each other, how it can increase efficiency. It can hopefully they see a value in increasing knowledge. It provides an example, an opportunity for a diverser work experience instead of being I'm a wastewater person by training primarily, and so was in laboratories and operations, and then led the facilities, and so in public sector, a lot of times historically you kind of hit a threshold or a ceiling, and until somebody retires or something happens, you're kind of there for a lot of years, and so there's much more workforce migration across different entities because those opportunities are now available. And then there's also internal opportunities that adhering to this type of approach can allow workforce to move forward. So I think the initial steps I would do is look internally, recognize the successes that you have, highlight those, champion those, and then leverage whatever it was that made those happen to be able to create that spinning flywheel to get the momentum going. So then you can take off and build that at a broader community and elected official level.
All right, well, it looks like we have a lot of great minds thinking alike as I have three questions all in asking for some detailed examples or case studies showcasing how One Water has been implemented, how you have implemented One Water with either your previous employment or now at Stantec.
Yeah, thank you. My previous employment with the city of Fort Collins, one of the examples that I like to talk a lot, and it has to go with workforce, but I had a wastewater collection operator, great employee, and this is when I was managing the facilities, a great employee, and had met the top level of his certifications, and he wanted to come over to the wastewater treatment plant, which has another set of certifications. And so but this individual, they interviewed well. We made them an offer for the job, but it would have required them to have a pay cut because of the level of certifications. And the culture that we had, really was one where we had all top level operators and some mid level operators. And so, the pay and cultures at plants are unique and awesome, but there's definitely, you have to pay attention to those cultures. And so, that was something that I was like, this is a great employee. I really want that person to come over, but we couldn't make it happen, primarily because of these certifications. So, that experience, made me consider and think about how can we alleviate that or how can we change that process. So Fort Collins, and I can't take credit for this to be ultimately executed, but I started the process, and so we and the leadership there, they've continued it, but they've set up a One Water operator position that's been through the funding to level all the skill ladders, to have a mentoring program, a shadowing program. And if you want to participate and you want to be, that type of a, top level wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, or even a water, you could have all four of your cert, and there's a way to navigate that for the life of your career. So, and that provides that, again, that career diversity that I think some employees want anyway. It provides that career progression, and then it provides a more resilient workforce for us because I can call up whoever and feel very confident that if needed they could go and operate heavy equipment, and they could do a BOD test if I needed them to. So it's that kind of enabling that I think is an example that I have from Fort Collins. The other one, we worked with the city of Portland, and the city of Portland is just starting out on their process, but they were they really took and championed that internal look at what they have already done and what they've already integrated in between their water bureaus and their environmental services. There was really great overlap in what they were already doing. So they've really kind of championed that and tried to leverage that going forward. And then I think they're pursuing a One Water director kind of position to kind of reorganize this and go forward. So those are the two kind of examples that I've seen. There's others, I mentioned Dig Once. Those are strategies that a lot of organizations implement, and it does save the ratepayers money and increase efficiency. in my experience, they're really hard to line up those schedule-wise because your funding mechanisms are different. Your utilities can, a lot of times they have more readily available funds versus your transportation funds are more dependent on exterior funding sources that you really have to hit that sweet spot with scheduling. And sometimes they don't always align, but the strategy and the effort and the implementation is ideal in that situation.
All right. I kind of mentioned this, and it sounded like maybe funding and some ratepayer efficiencies, but are there any other measurable benefits that you have documented with a one water versus a segmented approach to water management?
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything that's really documented. I mean, the types of KPIs that that I would use are things like efficiency and wrench time, certifications, financial rates, stabilization, predictability, the amount of projects you get done on your CIP versus having this huge backlog. But to be honest with you, a lot of utilities and water providers, they're just starting out on this journey. And so, and they're customizable and they're unique approaches for each one. So having a best management or benchmark KPIs that applies across the whole one water strategy, I think is something that is still being developed. But there are great minds in, the U.S. Water Alliance and EPA and others, including the consultants groups that can help lead through that.
All right, I see one more here in the queue. I'm going to hope that I understand this question and ask it right. This question says in some cases, there's a perception of competition between public water systems, and this applies to personnel as well as technology. And they mentioned that maybe some are just managed better than others. How do you overcome that type of issue where maybe better management is needed, or maybe the system is just not up to current best practices, I suppose, is I think the
Yeah,
question they're asking
that's a
there.
good question. And, I think in my experience, the water service providers, and I'm including wastewater and stormwater in that, that overall umbrella. There are some that are well funded, well ran, well staffed. Their resources, they're proactive. They're good. They're doing good work. And there's others that are in the same community, and maybe, this gets back to my community development slide there. They may be, really considered part of the community. That there's really little distinction from a community member. They think they have, drinking water, and they think it's part of the city, and so it's the city's drinking water. When there may be several water providers that are contributing to that water, and so and some of them do not have the resources as you meet these aging infrastructure, as you meet these regulatory pressures that are coming up, and they just don't have it. So that's where, to me, the approach that I took in the past, and I'm trying to, have these conversations with clients and anybody interested in, in having conversations with me about this, is really what are the overall drivers and levels of services, and can you have that conversation more at a community level or a regional level? Can you have it more at we're looking at a river right here. Can you have it more on a river basin standpoint? Can you put a basin management plan, that addresses some of these things, and you build, and there's lots of challenges in what I'm saying. I know that from a government standpoint, from an ownership standpoint, there's lots of hurdles to do this, but these are the kinds of things that, going forward with 2050, with 2040, these are the kinds of things that they need to happen. You have some that just do not have the resources, and yet they play a critical role in some of these development, areas of communities, and they're pressured to deliver water services that really they were not ever really set up to do from the beginning. So how do you have that conversation with them in a respectful manner, but it is at a kind of a higher a higher value kind of conversation to move the needle forward more to regional standpoint.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to make one last call here for questions. If not, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap us up for the day. So thank you, Jason, and for all of you for your participation. If you have questions for Jason, his contact info is sitting there in the Q&A chat window. You will receive an email within the next 2 weeks with your participation certificate. We will also be posting this presentation on stantec.com if you would like to listen again or share it with a colleague. Our next presentation will be next Wednesday, April 23rd. Where we will be talking about organizational change management. We hope to see you again soon. And well, thank you, everybody. And like I said, hope to see you next week and the rest of the year in the Stantec Water webinar series.
Thank you very much.